Hi there, I'm Paul. Thank you for coming to my channel to watch another of my videos. A little departure in this one. What we're going to have a look at today is creating a time tracking application. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do this as an example to show you what's possible and what you can achieve without writing any code. So you don't need any in-depth knowledge to do what we're going to do today, but what you do need is a broad knowledge of the capabilities of the various elements of Office 365. So in this example we're going to be making use of Flow, we're going to be making use of SharePoint and also Excel. So let me show you what we are going to build. So here is my mobile phone, and I've put a little button on here using Flow for my timesheet tracking, and the idea is that I can just log in, log out of work by hitting this button, and then my timesheet, and the timesheet not just for me but all of the other employees, could then populate automatically. So let's just have a look on the timesheet for a second, and then I'll come back to the phone. So we can see that today I have logged into work, but I haven't yet logged out of work. So I'm going to log out, and then we're going to see how this updates. So I'm going to go into my timesheet, which is part of Flow, and on here I'm just asking one question: are you arriving at work or are you leaving work? Are you starting or are you finishing? So I'm just going to say I'm exiting work. I'm going to OK that, and I'm going to hit the button for done, and we can see we've got a little activity signifier on this button. This is actually a little widget. So that now will have recorded my exit time. We've also now got a little, if I can get this to come down, there we are. We've got a little notification to let me know that has worked, that I have logged out of work. And what I've done in this notification, and we'll show you how to do this as well, is I've put a little link in there to say, well, where were you when you said you finished work? So if I click on that little link there, then it's going to jump us into Google Maps, and it's going to say, you were actually at home. But you can see there that we've recorded not only the fact that we were leaving work, we've recorded where we were when we hit the button as well. Okay, and we can see here in the background it has automatically refreshed. It just takes a minute or so, and again I'll show you how to do that. And it's saying, okay, you arrived at work at 8:21 and you left work at 10:36. So what you've done is 2.2 hours. So all I've had to do is hit the button, and it has recorded for me, okay, how many hours did you work that day? And if you've got to track the time for 10, 15, 20 people, that can be a real pain of a thing to do. So you could just share this button with people, say to them, make sure that when you arrive at work you hit the button and say work arrival, when you leave you hit the button and say work exit, and that's all you got to do. So complete time tracking system just by using the elements that are within Office 365. So how did we build it? Let's have a little look at that. So we start with Flow. Let's just move this out of the way and go into Flow. So here's Flow. So there's the one I created earlier, but I'll create a new one to give you the full steps of how this is done. So I'm going to create a new Flow. So we'll give that a second to here. I'll create from a blank one, so I'm putting the whole thing together. There is actually a timesheet tracking one that you can find a template for. That records the information directly into Excel. What I'm doing here, I'll show you as I go through, is I'm recording it in SharePoint, in a SharePoint list, but then displaying it in Excel. And I found that much better. If you record it directly in Excel, then there are weird things. If someone's got the Excel spreadsheet open at the time that someone's trying to record their hours, their arrival or their exit, then the flow fails because the spreadsheet is locked and yada yada. So from my experimenting, doing it through SharePoint is better. Okay, so a flow always has to be started from a trigger, so it might be the arrival of an email or it might be a schedule. In this case, what we want to do is we want to have it start when we press a button. So we're going to have a look for the button trigger. So here we are, we're going to go with a flow button. We don't need to involve power apps in this can be even simpler and just be flow. So here we are, and yep, flow button for mobile. Let's select that one. So we're starting to put our flow together now. So what this flow does is when you press a button, the flow starts, and it's a manual button for mobile. It will record a few things like what the time was and the actual GPS location, latitude and longitude, and then we can ask the user to input other information. So that's what I'm going to do with this add input, because we want to know whether the user is saying they're arriving at work or leaving at work. So there's different sorts of input we can put in. We just want some text input. So input, please specify arrival or exit, and what we can do there, is say that we want to have a list of options. So my first option is, let's call it work arrival, and my other option is work exit. And of course you could have more options here. If you need to know whether the person is working from home or working at a client site or working in the office, then you can just give them more options to pick from here. So that's great. So that's this step completed. So let's add an action. And what I want to do now is I want to create a row in a SharePoint list. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the list. There's one I created earlier here, but again I'll create another one from scratch just so that you can see how it's done, although it's very straightforward. So I'm going to go into my SharePoint site and I'm just going to say I want a new list, and then I'll just quickly pop the fields in there so that we've got somewhere to store this information. Okay, so let's go with the site contents. And let's say that we want to have a new list. So let's do that. We want to add a list, and we'll give the list a name. I can't remember what I called the other one. Oh, I see it now, it's called timesheet. Let's call this one time tracker. There we are, and we'll just create that. Okay, so there's a few things that we want to record when we do this. So assuming that this is for multiple people, not just for yourself, we're going to want to specify, well, who is it who is leaving or arriving at work. So that can just be a straightforward single line of text. We're going to call that user. Now we want to know whether this person was arriving at work or leaving at work. So I'm just going to call that event. What was the event? Was the event the arrival or was the event the exit? So again, I'm just going to have that as a single line of text. Now I mentioned that you can also record the latitude and longitude where the person was when they pressed the button. So we'll put that in as well. Now I've actually found that for the latitude and longitude, using a text field is superior to using a number. I had some issues when I tried doing it with number, so although there's only ever going to be a number in there, latitude and longitude, let's have them as single line of text columns. So latitude, longitude, there we go. And of course we're going to want the date and time that the person hit the button, so that we can calculate the hours between the start time and the finish time. So we're going to do that as well. So I've got to go into more this time so I can get into the date and time options. So I'm going to call this event time, and I'm going to say this is a date and time column. And of course what we want to do is to make sure that we're recording both the date and the time. Make sure you click that little button there so that you don't just get stuck with the date. It's not very helpful for this. Right, so let's hit OK there. And I think that's all of the columns that we need, so we can always come back to it later. So remember, this is my time tracker list that I have created in my SharePoint site. So now I am ready to say that I want to do a create item action. I could also have searched on SharePoint as well, but here we are, SharePoint create item. And it wants to know where I'm going to create that item. So I've got to specify my my site. So let's do that quickly. So you don't pick up the whole URL, it's just the URL for the site. And then once you've specified the site, then it should ask you what list do you want to use. So remember, timesheet was the one I was showing you to begin with. Time tracker is the one that we've just created. So there we go. Now that I've done that, now that I've connected it to that SharePoint list, then Flow can look into that and see what columns are there and say, okay, well, what do you want to put in these columns? So let's start filling these in. So as I click in these boxes, what Flow will do is it will say, okay, well, here are items that you have collected in earlier steps in your flow. So this is all from the from this button step. So the button step, so for a mobile button step, you get things like, as I've said, the latitude and longitude. It will also give you your full address as well, so you could put that in there if you wanted to. The time and whoever's logged in, what's their username and what's their user email. So for the user, I'll go for the username. So I'm just going to click to insert that in there. Okay, the event, so remember the event came from this little set of input choices that we put in. So here, under my things that have been created by the button, I can choose my input, and that's going to be my work arrival or my work exit, whatever we selected there. The latitude, let's select latitude. Longitude, we'll select longitude. And then event time. Now, working with times is funny, or can be funny, particularly if you're crossing time zones and things. So one way to try to make sure you don't get thoroughly confused if you've got people in more than one time zone, or if your SharePoint time zone is set to one thing and you're in a different location, then what we can do is we can come to our expression list, and there's an expression which is called UTC now. Okay, and it gives you whatever the time is on the server in UTC time format, and then from there obviously you can apply a little calculation to say, well, we're 5 hours ahead of that, or we're 3 hours behind that, whatever is the case. So I'm going to pop in UTC time there. We can leave title blank, but I'm actually going to put something in there. I'm going to make that a combination of the username and of the event which we get from the input box, and we'll put in the UTC now again. There we are. So that's all of the information that we want to pick up whenever somebody pushes on that button on their phone. What I did in the example that I showed you right at the beginning of this video was I set it to also give a notification, so that the person knows that the flow has worked. They get a little tick in the widget, but it might be nice to have a notification. Or you might want to not notify them, but perhaps just notify, the manager or whoever. So, oops. Notifications, I've spelt it wrong. Notification, in fact there it is, so let's, didn't quite get to it in time. Here we are, notifications. So send me a mobile notification, or it could be an email notification if you want something to go to the manager. So we'll say send me a mobile notification, What text do we want to have? Well, again, we can build that text up from our list of things. Now when I scroll down this list, because I've got two steps here, I've got information which has come from my flow button, and I've got information which is inside my SharePoint list. Now, a lot of that is duplicated, a lot of it is the same thing twice, but you can see in here I've now got things like the identifier, the ID from the SharePoint list, and is this item a record, the latitude that we recorded, the longitude, and so on. So I'm going to scroll through those, and I'm going to come back down to my button ones. So we'll have the same thing again for this notification. We're going to see the username, we're going to see the input, were they arriving, were they leaving, and we'll have the UTC now again. And we can also put a little link on here, so let me show you something nice with that. What we can do is we can actually, as you saw, create a link that shows us where the person was when they pushed the button. So we'll do that now. So I've saved on the clipboard the first part of the link that you need, and it's just http maps.google. You could use Bing as well, but for Google Maps it's maps.google.com maps?q equals, and then we're going to have to put in our latitude and longitude. So let's just put that in, just to make sure I haven't got any leading spaces, because that messes things up. So it's latitude and then longitude separated by a comma. So let's actually fill in our dynamic latitude, comma, longitude, and in my link label then I can say click here to see location of event, or I could say location of, and use that input again, so it'll say the location of work arrival or work exit. So that's my flow. So only 3 steps to the flow if you want to have a notification as well. So I'm going to give this flow a name, so I'm going to call this one time tracker, and I'm going to say create my flow. So there we are, my flow has been created. I can click done on here, and we should see it listed in my list of flows. We'll just make sure that it is enabled. Okay, let's just try a refresh on here. My connection seems to be problematic today. Okay, so yeah, so here we are, we've got our time tracker, and yeah, we can see that the time tracker one that we created is enabled, it's turned on, so that's good. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my mobile device now, on which I've already got Flow installed. So let's just go back to our home screen. Let's go to Flow. There we are, come out of the notification that was left on earlier. I can go to buttons. So now I can see I've got 2 buttons. So I've got timesheet flow button and a time tracker button. So that's great. Now I'd quite like to have that on my home screen, so I don't have to come into Flow and choose from the buttons. You can do that, hit Flow and then choose the button that you want. But if you're on an Android device, one little thing that you can do is you can add a widget. So if I go to add widgets, here's the Flow widget. Okay, so that was just taking a second there. So I can then choose the button that I want to have in this widget. There we are, so I've got 2 to choose from, so I'm going to have the time tracker button this time. and there we are, it's popped it on my device. Oops, okay, the screen emulation software is a little bit funky. Let me see if I can just move this button somewhere else. There we are. So I'll leave it up the top here for a moment so that we can see, and you can resize these as well, but I've got it small, just like a button on the device. So now I'm going to tap that button, and here we are. It's giving me my option. Please specify work arrival or work exit. I'll say I'm arriving at work. I'm going to hit OK on there, and then done, because I've filled in all of the information. And there we've got a little tick to say that it is completed. So that's fantastic. And let's have a little look then in our time tracker. Here we are, our time tracker list, and hit the refresh button on there, and hopefully we should see the work arrival that I just did on the mobile device. Fantastic, there you can see it, it's all filled in. And if I just flick back to the mobile device, we'll see that I did get a notification and here we are, we can see it saying click here to see the location of work arrival. So remember, I used the dynamic input field, so if I had clicked to leave work, then that would say click here to see the location of work exit. I could have put the username on there as well, so we can fill that up with other information, and we'll just tap on that to show, there we are, it's showing us where I am when I've clicked the button. So that's great. So we are building up a list of work arrival and work exit times, and that's very handy. So now we've got all the information centralized, it's all in one place. But as this stands, let's just go into the other one where we've got a little bit more information. What you've got is a whole series of arrival, exit, arrival, exit. There's still manual work to be done here to figure out how long the person has worked, because you've got to say, okay, well on this particular day the person arrived at this time and they left at this time, and then the next day I've got to work out when did they arrive, when did they leave. So I'm very lazy, that's why I went into IT, and I want the machine to do all of the work for me, because why should I have to keep going through this over and over again? You know, let the computer do the heavy lifting and the hard work. So let me show you how we do that. So I will create a new Excel spreadsheet. So this is the one that we created before, but I'll do the whole thing from scratch so that you can see all of the steps. So I'm just going to create a new blank workbook, and in our blank workbook what we're going to do, we're going to build this up. So like in my example, the system is going to work out for each day what's the arrival and what's the exit time, and how many hours have you actually spent working, what's your timesheet claim. Let's go into this blank version. What we're going to do is we're going to connect to the SharePoint list so that we can get the data from it, and then we're going to use the get and transform features that are in Excel. Now I've just started getting into these, and you know, they're very good. I'm quite impressed with them. I am a SQL Server developer primarily, so in the past what I've tended to do is to do all of this data manipulation in SQL Server, because I'm familiar with it and it's available to me, and then just display the final output in Excel. But what we're going to do this time, because we can't do that data manipulation in SharePoint, is we're going to connect to the SharePoint list, we're going to do the data manipulation in Excel. So let's do that then. So I'm going to go to my data menu, I'm going to say I want to get data, I want to get it from an online service. Why have I not got SharePoint listed there? Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so the way I normally do this is get data from online services and then choose SharePoint and the relevant list. for some strange reason, now that I want to record the video, it's not there. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, so let's have a look at an alternative way that we can work. So I'm just going to pop back into my SharePoint list. Now I'm going to use this list because I've got more data in there. So the list we created was the one called Time Tracker, but I'm going to use the timesheet list just because I've got a few more rows of data in there to play with, so it will be a little bit clearer. And I'm going to use the export to Excel option rather than the option that I was going to use previously. So let's go ahead and get this data into Excel. So it still gets us data in a refreshable list. So we're going to have that bring the data into a table for us. Fantastic. So just tidy up the screen a little bit. Here we go. So here's the data out of my SharePoint list. Now, what I want to do now is I want to do some shaping of this data, because I don't want this arrival exit, arrival exit, arrival exit. What I want is to have the arrival and the exit side by side and then calculate the number of hours. And the other thing that I want to do is, you can see on the, or you may have seen on the one I had open previously, it said earliest arrival and latest exit. So what if somebody comes into work, hits the button, thinks that it hasn't actually worked, and then hits the button again later on? So if you've got 2 arrivals on the same day, we'll just take the earlier one, and if you've got 2 exits on the same day, we'll just take the later. So we're keeping this as a fairly simple example where people arrive at work and they leave work and they do it on the same day and they just do it once. As we go through, you'll see that you could make it more sophisticated than that, but for right now that's going to be complex enough for us to see how to put this together. So then I'm going to go to my data menu, and rather than say get my data from SharePoint, because for some odd reason that's not working right now, I'm going to say, well, just get my data from a table. So I've brought this data in as a table. I can refresh it as I require. So I can now use this in this query editor to do my transformations to get the data in the format that I want to see it. So let's just wait for a second while it brings this in. So that's great. Here's our information. Now there's some stuff that I don't really need to see in here, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear away the columns that we're really not interested in. So I'm going to say that we don't need to worry about these columns, and we don't really need to worry about the title because we've got all that information in the other columns anyway. So I'm going to remove the columns that I don't need. So that's great, and I'll give this table a name now. I'm going to do this all in small steps, so it's a little bit more obvious what's going on. Some of the steps we could combine, but I'm going to do it in small steps. So I'll call this our base data for want of a better description. So there we are, and we're going to save that. And you'll see what that does. It's going to give us an extra tab which is giving us the output of that transformation. Okay, so it took a moment. My PC is overheating, but I don't want to do a restart right now. And so we can see we've got our information. So what you can see here, we've done it a slightly different way than I was doing it previously when I created the demo I showed you, but we've got a query that goes and gets the data from SharePoint, sorry, a connection that gets the data from SharePoint, and then a query which starts to do our transformations for us. So let's go back into our data and our queries and connections. Actually, we can actually do it from here. Let's go into the edit. There we are, and our list is here. There's our base data. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate it, and what I want to do is I want to find the earliest work arrival time for each day. And I've missed out a step, because what I'm going to want to do, oh no, I can probably do it at this level, bear with me. I did say I was a little bit new to get and transform stuff. So I need to know what day people have submitted their data for. So I'm going to duplicate my event time column, and I'm going to transform it so that it is just the date. And now I can call this the event date. So we've got one for the full event time and one for the event date. There we go. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say I'm trying to find the earliest arrivals at this point in the process. So I am going to say give me the work arrivals only. There we are. And I am also now going to try and find the earliest work arrival time. So if there were two on the same day, we want to take the earliest. So let's have a little look how we can do that. We can do that with a group by. Here we are. And I'm going to say I want to group by the user. I also want to group by the event date. So I want to say for this user, for this date, what is the earliest time that they marked a work arrival. So I've got to group by these two columns, user and event date, and I'm going to have a new column name which is going to be my earliest arrival. And what I want to do there is I want to find the the minimum value, because it's the earliest, the minimum value in the column event time. So remember, we've already filtered this down to say in this step I'm just dealing with my arrival times, and we're going to say okay, for each day, for each user, what was their earliest arrival. So that should be okay there. So there we are. It's hidden away the columns that weren't part of the grouping, but I've now got something that, as I say, gives me the user, the event date, and the first arrival they marked on that date. So I'm going to go ahead and call this step earliest arrival. And what I want to do next is I want to find the latest exit. And a little trick we can do here is I can actually duplicate that step, that query, and I'm going to rename it and call it latest exit. And I'm just going to change the step where we did the filtering and the grouping. So this is quite neat. What you can do is you can see all of the steps that we went through in order. So if we go back to the filtering step and we edit the filtering step, what we can do is we can say, okay, in this case we want to get the last exit time. There we go. And in our grouping, let's just edit our grouping. We want to make sure that we're creating a column which is called the latest exit, and that we are basing that on the maximum of the event time. And we don't need to change this, we're still doing this by user and event date. So remember, we are now filtering for the exit time, and we're just saying, okay, we've only got exit times in here, so look by the user, look by the day. For each user day combination, then give me the latest exit time, the latest event time, because we're filtered to the exit. So I'm going to OK there. So that's really nice. So look at what I've got here. I've got an earliest arrival time, and I've got a latest exit time for each day. So there's one more step. What I want to do is I want to merge these together. So I say, okay, if I've got an arrival time and a user for a given day, and I've got an exit time for the same user for the same day, then put that information side by side. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to add a new query. Let me try and remember where that option is. Yeah, here we are. So I want a merge query. I'm merging these together. So I'll do this as a new step, because I think it helps to sort of break these things down, particularly when we're demonstrating them. So what we're going to do, we're going to combine the earliest arrival and the latest exit queries. So we've transformed this data, so we've got user event date arrival time, and there's user event date and exit time, and the columns that we want to match are going to be the user and the event from the earliest arrival, and the user and the event date from the latest exit. And then we've got to say what kind of join do we want to perform. So let's just take a moment to think about scenarios which may happen. So we may have someone who has arrived at work but they haven't exited yet, and we may still want to see that information. Equally, we may have someone who accidentally forgot or didn't correctly press the I'm arriving at work button. So what we want to be able to do is we want to say, okay, if I've got, for example, a date the 29th here with no with an earliest arrival, but I don't have a match here, I still want to show that information. Okay, so I want to show the earliest arrival filled in and the latest exit being empty. And equally, if it's the other way around, I might have a latest exit value and no corresponding earliest arrival. So I would just want the earliest arrival to be blank when I put these columns side by side. So what we want to do here, it describes what the different join types are that you've got. So do I only want all the information from the first table and the stuff from the second table that matches, or do I want all the information from the second table and just from the first table that matches? No, what I want is everything. I want everything from this table and everything from this table. So put them together where they match, and where they don't match, still include them. So I'm going to hit the OK button on there, having said what type of join we want. So now we can see we've got user, event date, earliest arrival, and then it's giving me a table because I've got a whole batch of values. I've got another username, event date, and a latest exit. So we can expand that out by clicking this little button here and saying, well, what columns do you actually want to see? Now, I'm going to show all three of those columns, and I'll show you why in just a moment. Let's name this one, and let's call this one let's just call this one time tracker, because this is the final step. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, right, close and load. So I'm going to come out of all this transformation stuff. I've used the transformation to get my data into the format that I want, where I can see my earliest arrival and my latest exit side by side, and now I'm going to jump into Excel. Okay, so it's going to go away and it's going to do these transformations and figure these things out. And yeah, here we are. So on this one sheet I don't actually need these other sheets. It's given me one sheet for each query that I created. Don't actually really need to see these other queries, so I can even delete those sheets out, and I'll call this sheet my time tracker. And what I can see here is I've got my user, event date and arrival, and my user, my event date and my exit. Because remember, what I'm saying here is that I might have an arrival and no exit, or an exit and no arrival, so I need to see the username and the event date from both tables. Let's actually jump into SharePoint for just a second, and we'll emulate that. So let's delete out one of my entries. Just make sure this is refreshed first. Okay, there we are. So I'm just going to delete out this final entry here for this work exit. So I'm going to delete that. Oopsie. Come on. And we'll go back into Excel again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a data and a refresh all. So let's see here. For the final day, I end up having an entry for my earliest arrival, but I've got no corresponding entry here, so some of these are blank. And if I had deleted out the arrival but left the exit, then this one would be filled in and this one would be blank. In fact, just to make things completely clear, let's do that. Let's get rid of the arrival from the previous day. So I'll delete that out. And we'll refresh, and then we've got an example of each permutation that we can have. We've got an arrival and an exit, or we've got just an arrival or just an exit, so we can see how that looks. So there we are. So you can see how that's coming together. So what we want to do now is we want to make sure that we've got a column that always shows us our user, and a column that always shows us our event date, and then our earliest arrival and our latest exit. We could have done this step in the get and transform data, but I'm going to just do it with a formula in Excel. So I want to have a formula here which just says if is blank this user column, then show this user column. Otherwise, if it's not blank, then show whatever was in that value. So there we are. So now we've got a formula that's just saying, okay, look at both of these and give me a value. Whichever one has got a value, show it to me. We're going to do exactly the same thing with the event date. So if is blank my event date here, then give me my event date here. But if my event date wasn't blank, then give me that one. Oopsie daisy. I didn't close off my bracket after this event date. Okay, so there we are, and what we will just quickly do here is we will format this as a date so that we can see. There we are, that we've got dates there. So what we could do now is we could actually hide these columns away. We could change the order of the columns, so let's just pop these ones over here. There we are, and we'll call these name and day. So we now have something which is giving us for each user, for each day, their arrival time and their exit time. Oops, excuse me, I think I hid the wrong column. Let's just get this back to where we were. Sorry about that. Oops. Butterfingers, come on, let's go backwards and forwards through these again. So there we are, I've got that column back in. Sorry, so we had the exit time, but I hid the arrival time. So I'm just going to repeat that step of making that the day again. So we've got name and we've got day, and let's just unhide. Oh, okay, we just scrolled across. And let's make sure that we're just hiding the things that we should be hiding. So we want to get rid of that, and that, because we want to make sure our arrival and our exits are visible. So apologies there. At least you're getting to see these steps again if you need them. Oh, and hide. So there we are. So we've got our arrival and our exit, and as I say, I'll just shuffle these columns around a little bit. So name, day, arrival and exit, and we're in Excel, so we can do a straightforward. I want to take my exit time, subtract my arrival time, and we'll see what that's going to give us. That's going to give us a time period in days. So remember that any date in Excel is just a number, and it's the number of days since the 1st of January 1900. So if I were to change the format here to a number, you can see that's just giving me, there were 43,185 days. So when you subtract one date from another, you're getting the number of days in between. And if you've got a date with a time, then the time element of it is just a decimal, so it's 0.28 of a day. So what you can do then, let's set that back to being a date again. Oh, sorry, date and time. Let's just fill the formatting. So when we do a subtraction, so these are two times on the same day, and it's going to tell us what proportion of the day as a decimal was there. So if we take that number and we multiply it by 24, we get that in hours rather than in days. Okay, so I've got slightly funny information here. Arrived at 6:37, left at 6:49, so that is 0.2 of an hour. These ones, because I took out the arrival and the exit, are going to give you some very odd results. So probably what we want to do is we want to beef this up a little bit and just make sure that both of these cells have got information in them, and if any one of them is blank, then don't bother trying to tell us how many hours we were there. So we can just use an if, and we can use then an or, and we're saying if the arrival time is blank, oops, there we are, if the arrival time is blank, or is blank the exit time, then don't put anything in, otherwise do the calculation that we were trying to do. Right, I'm all thumbs and fingers today, so excuse me, let's do that again. If is blank the earliest arrival, let's wrap that in an or. So if is blank the earliest arrival, or is blank the latest exit, then do nothing, otherwise subtract the arrival from the exit, multiply it by 24 to get it in a period of hours. And of course I've left a bracket out of this is blank. And I've put in an extra bracket which I don't need somewhere there. Yeah, closing off that or statement. There we go. I do know what I'm doing in Excel, honestly. So now we can see on this day the hours worked is 0.2 hours, because we've only worked for 12 minutes. On this day we haven't bothered calculating, and on this day we haven't bothered calculating because we don't have an exit time or an arrival time in there. If we did, then it would calculate it out for us. So there we have it. We got there in the end. Sorry for a few typos along the way. what we've done there is we've built a complete system where our users can hit a button on their mobile phone, specify whether they are arriving at work or leaving at work, and then this whole timesheet thing will all automatically generate for you. And all you've got to do is you can go up to data and refresh all, and it will bring in the data again, it will perform the transformations again, and then there we are, it gives us our result. So if I just very quickly put in an exit time for the 28th of March again, so we'll then see that it all generates for itself. So I'm going to do a quick edit just to get something in for the 28th of March again. Or I would do if... Oh, okay, I was just too impatient there. Let's try that again. Quick edit. There we are. So let's just copy the existing entries. So we'll make this entry exit work. We don't have to worry too much about what's in there. We will copy down the latitude, longitude. We'll make this work exit, and we will set a time, and I will set that 8 hours after the time that we've got above. Yep, and just fill my name down again. So there we are. We've now got a new row for the 28th of March. We've got an exit time now. So into here. So this is the cell that we are expecting to be populated. So I'm just going to hit the refresh all on there. And as I say, the system is going to go away. It's going to bring in all of the information again from before. And yes, there we are. We can see 1:21 till 8:21, and it's giving us just shy of 7 hours of work. And probably what we would also want to do, because we don't need that many decimal places, is just to reduce that down a little bit. There we go, don't include the header. So 0.2 of an hour, 6.98 of an hour. So that all refreshes for us. In fact, you can even go into the properties of these queries and tell it that you want to refresh, for example, every minute, and refresh every time you open the file up. So you can even set it up so you don't have to hit the refresh data button. It will just refresh automatically every few minutes or every time you open the file, so you're always looking at the latest data. So whereas before perhaps you were having to, you know, take emails from people where they've telling you what hours they've worked, and then you're having to type them in and put in formulas and loads of manual work. Now you can just give them a button, bring up this on your screen, set your auto refresh to every minute, put your feet up, have a cup of tea, read the internet. All the work is being done for you, all automated. Okay, so there was no code or anything in there, so we did have to go through several different elements of Office 365. So we had to look at Flow, we had to look a little bit at SharePoint, because we're using the list to store the data, and we had to look at Excel, and we spent some time on messing around with the get and transform function, and then putting a few formulas into the final output of that. But hopefully you can see there's an awful lot of power built into Office 365 if you just have that breadth of knowledge to think, okay, I want to automate a time system. How can I get data off users? Okay, well maybe I can do that with a Flow by putting a button on their mobile. Where can I put that data? Oh, okay, I can put it in a SharePoint list. Now, how can I analyze and manipulate that data? Oh, I can link it up to Excel, and I can do some clever get and transform stuff so that I'm getting the data exactly in the format that I want it to, and even refreshing automatically so you know, I don't have to do anything at all. So super powerful stuff. Okay, I hope you've found that of use. I think it's kind of neat, but let me know what you think. So I appreciate people taking just a moment to put something in the comments. Tell me whether you found this useful, whether you didn't, you know, whether the style of presentation is something you like or something you don't. Really helps me to improve by getting your feedback. If there's other things you want me to cover, then let me know that as well. Okay, but for now, I'll just say thank you very much and have a great day. Okay, bye-bye.